r/AskReddit. What are some red flags for teachers that scream drop this class immediately? Professor claimed she didn't allow people to step out of class to use the bathroom. You're all adults, not children. You can hold it. Exactly, lady. We're adults. We paid to be here. And adults have to use the bathroom. Tenured organic chem prof. Any questions? 50 hands go up. Prof. It's a fairly simple concept. So you will get there. Let's move on. When she decides to drop one of her exams and assign a 30-page paper instead, promising that it will be an easier assignment. No laptops. All code will be handwritten. Yes, that really happened. When they read the PowerPoints word for word. I can do that at home. Teach PLS. The use of McGraw-Hill Connect if the class isn't absolutely necessary. These books are required for the class. I wasn't able to get the revision into the bookstore in time. So the only place you can get them is from me directly or from my website. I will warn you. If you don't buy the books, you won't get the login information to be able to take the final, which is 90% of your grade. Oh. And no. I can't accept financial aid for them. But it's only $250, so it's not a big deal. Never seen an entire class get up 5 minutes and then leave before. I had a professor that in hindsight I really should have dropped. It was a Western civilization history class. And the first day the entirety of the class he spent talking about how he missed his old job teaching in Europe because American students are more lazy and incapable of getting as high of grades. Then he showed intro YouTube videos from his personal laptop hooked to a projector, and all of the recommend videos all had titles like Grinding with Thong, Sexy College Babe Grinding, etc. I thought he was just eccentric. But the guy was easily the worst teacher I ever had. He would expect you to totally memorize all the chapter. He would quiz on material that didn't matter for concepts. i.e., what was the name of Caesar's second cousin? When the information would be found in a huge family tree. The only students in the class with A's were women. And he would grade their quizzes differently and be much more lenient. The students compared quiz results. Someone in class called him out and he said that he was tired of teaching Americans and doesn't get paid enough. Literally. Pride in the difficulty of their course. If everyone fails, it's not for an inability to learn, but for an inability to teach. This class will be using a textbook that I am writing and editing during the semester. Translation. It's going to be amateur hour. In addition to trying to learn new stuff, you are paying the school for the privilege of proofreading your professor's book. Day 1 of grad school for electrical engineering, multivariable Laplace transforms. Everyone takes their seats and professor smiles and says in a thick Russian accent, "Disforstklasitage." Okay. Had a drawing professor that put a stack of pre-signed withdrawal forms on his desk. Told us to grab one when we were ready. Over the winter break of my freshman year I was diagnosed with a degenerative bone disease in my knees, which meant I had to use crutches for a while, then eventually a wheelchair for a time. I was late to my philosophy 101 class, due to adjusting to my newfound limitations. I apologized for my tardiness and tried to find my seat without making a fuss. As I was making my way across the classroom, my philosophy teacher remarked, "Everyone, let's just patiently wait for the cripple here to get to his seat." It's possible she had believed I was one of several skiing injuries that the student body had incurred over winter break. But either way, after that first day I never came back to that class. Think that their students should only focus on this particular class for the upcoming semester, as if they should spend all their time on it. Gives a test on the first day that will be counted against you. Had one of my mathematics teachers do this. The required textbook is a saran wrapped package of loose leaf papers that cost $100. Authored by the professor. When the teacher doesn't even explain anything. He just goes on YouTube and shows the class a video and everyone is left without a clue of what is going on. I dropped computer science because of this. And I'm glad that I did. Also, when the teacher hardly ever explains anything and insists in independent research. More like I can't be asked preparing lessons, so just go ahead and do it yourself. Too many people got A's last semester. So I'm changing my syllabus for you all. When the history teacher makes the German exchange student cry for simply being German. You should drop all of your other classes because this course will require a lot of time and effort. Back when I started college, I got straight A+S in a class. But when I went to check on my overall grade, I had a B+. Found it odd and went to question my teacher about it. He said that he dropped down my grade because the class was a bit of a pain in the ass. He didn't use those exact words, but that's what he meant. Then I questioned him again about my posture, asking if I did anything wrong, or disturbed class or whatever. He promptly said I didn't and that I was a great student, which made me ask again why is grade lower then. He told the same excuse from above. Then I asked if he was planning on changing my grade at all, since I had only As, and he promptly said he wasn't going to change. Fast forward a few days, I ended up filing a complaint about him and his method of grading students, and the college made him change my grade. After that he approached me and said something like, hey you forces, you didn't have to file a complaint about me. I was gonna fix you grade yada yada. I'll make the class too hard and curve the class average to a C, because C is average. Get out the science textbooks and work on chapter 5. Activity 1 inches. Proceeds to sit down at their desk to do random shit on their computer. 2 hour. In class. Pre-recorded PowerPoint lectures from 2008. Because it saves time for me. And please don't ask questions until after the end of my PowerPoint. This was in 2017. This is my first time teaching. So you'll be my guinea pigs. Her test averages were low 50s with no scaling. It was great. The instructor either seems to have trouble speaking in the language in which the class is being taught, or their accent is so thick that it's difficult to understand them. While plenty of people are incredibly knowledgeable about their topic of interest without being great at multiple languages. The fact of the matter is that you're not going to learn much if you're going to have to devote so much of your attention into just figuring out what the instructor is saying. I've had teachers that I just simply couldn't understand due to a language barrier, and in hindsight I should have dropped immediately. I learned that basically if you can't understand what the teacher is saying, be prepared to teach yourself a lot of the class. I had an accounting teacher one time who was Chinese, and I remember sitting in that class on the first day scratching my head because I had no idea what she was saying. I looked around and a lot of the other people had the same look on their faces. The next week I showed up to class and what was once a classroom of about 40 people was now about 12. I should have known right there to drop. But I didn't. I stuck it out and a few weeks go by and it didn't get any better. I got my first test back and completely bombed it. I told myself right then that I was going to have to teach myself the material and that coming to class was pointless. So I taught myself accounting by using the textbook. Since I didn't go to class I missed all of her pop quizzes but just told myself I'll make it up on the tests. I only showed up for tests and the final, and lo and behold, I passed the class. When they really put down good students for smaller mistakes. There's a huge waitlist of students for a different section with a different professor. Oh, and she doesn't speak your native language well enough to communicate the class material. Yes, you will go to class, study for tests, and do all of the bonus projects. But rest assured you'll get the first C of your college career in a damn general education requirement because of her. If all your professor does is read from the textbook, then drop that class. If you can. Sometimes you need it for your major, or a time conflict. But if you can, drop it. You know how to read. My name is Konstantin Makarov. I was nuclear physicist in Russia. This course will not be easy. Not all will survive. But we can get through it together. First words uttered by my differential equations professor. If they segregate students. I had an American history class where on the first day the teacher told everyone that no one was to sit in the furthest left row of seats. Those seats were reserved for the what she called idiots. Idiots were people who arrived late for class. My class before this ended 5 minutes before this class did and was on the other side of campus. I took the safe route and dropped the class. This was before the school made it a rule that you had to have 10 minutes between classes. And the professor was an adjunct professor. On an unrelated note, I had an English teacher at this same school that thought when someone had a number on the back window of their car, a number the DMV makes you put there due to some issue with your registration, it meant they were bad drivers and essentially on notice. She thought this because she said she had only ever seen Asian drivers with them. The girl who explained what it actually meant knew because she had had one, and was also Asian. That last teacher I know for a fact no longer works as a teacher. No one will get an A in this course because insert some philosophical highbrow bullshit answer. If they do icebreakers not just on the first day, but the second day as well, it means they have no idea what they are doing. Was a freshman in college. Needed to get some science credits with a lab. Took geology because I wanted to try something besides bio that I just took in high school. The teacher gave a speech the first day of class about how it gets under her skin that people take geology because they're required to take a lab and just assume that it'll be an easy A. So, she said this class will not be an easy A, and then proceeded to make it hard as fuck. Like make it challenging so people will be engaged, but make it nigh impossible to pass just to prove a point. I had some issues with my schedule and wasn't registered for a particular course on the first day of class. So I registered and attended on the second day. He had already paired up the class into groups of 3-4 on day 1 for a project that would span the entire course and count for a large part of our grade. When I asked if I could be joined into a smaller group, he told me no, that I could do the work solo for the semester. I was peeved, but needed that course as a prerequisite for something I needed next semester, so I silently fumed. After week 2 I had failed 2 reports because he just didn't like what I wrote. Not that the reasoning, research, or writing was unsound, he just didn't like the subject, so he gave me failing grades. I dropped the class, took it with another teacher the next semester, and graduated a semester late because of it. I don't regret it. He was a horrible teacher and I'm sure my mental health would have suffered if I had continued in his class. Reviews on Rate My Professor. There are a few times that the student was just mad that they got a low grade, but more often than not, they are spot on. Over half this class is retaking this class, more a reflection on the professor than the students. Definitely one of the biggest things you need to consider is that even if there is a large workload, depending on the subject it may help. You have to remember that the professor has to also grade this stuff, so assuming there's no TA doing all of the grading, it is extra work for him. It's not what you want to hear. But take for example my physical chemistry professor. He assigned 1-2 homework assignments per week, and they took anywhere from 3-6 hours on average to finish. It sucked ass. But instead of guessing on exams, I fully understood the material. This professor was always answering emails as well, within an hour at almost any time of the day. If they have shitty response times, they probably won't be that helpful, and I'd recommend dropping. The most helpful professors I've had were the ones that answered emails ASAP. You have to buy this online book to have access to the online homework, when I can get the PDF of the book by various means. Who the hell want to pay to do homework twice? Edit. See, I was going to reply to everyone, but then there are a buttload of comments. Pearson, Sapling, Hooks, Wiley, all of them are crooks in book. I've been fortunate to not have any of those classes since sophomore year, but did I hate it when did. RedditJar. Obligatory. My highest updated post comment is to me fussing about how something costs too much. I approve. It's a real shame college administrations by and large promote this tomfoolery for a bird dog fee. I don't see it ending soon. Not without some sort of textbook industry collapse and rebirth. For the short term, if you can galvanize your classmates to discuss better and affordable options, there could be success there. It sounds idealistic, but sometimes just asking makes a big difference. Or maybe just a free cookie. I've never taught this before, so I'll be learning along with you. Edit. She ended up getting double teamed by 2 seniors and let go. The opposite. Purchasing the book for this class will not be necessary. Save your money. I have a PDF copy if anyone needs it, but we will follow along together. And I have printouts of all the questions. When a teacher does that, I'm like, okay, They obviously care about making this a good experience and not wasting my time or money. We'll be doing 3 group projects this semester. I will assign the group and it will be the same group for all 3 projects. Nope. The teacher talks as if he is from I am Verismith. 70% of students will fail this class. GTFO. Personal experience. I literally dropped 4 classes my sophomore year. Prior to starting the classes, the disability department contacted all of my teachers to tell them that I am deaf and that I would need some form of written typed paper to follow along with lectures. I'm completely deaf. Sit closer. I can't give you special treatment. I had a sociology class where during the introductory lecture the professor went on a tangent about how since she has a doctorate, if she was ever on a plane and someone asked is there a doctor on board, she would say she was a doctor. If you didn't call her DR, she would ignore you. She stated that holding a doctorate in sociology should carry the same clout as being an MD. No disrespect to sociologists or anyone with a PhD, but those are not the same things. She went on other rants about how nobody has ever gotten a 4.0 in her class and she was proud of it. It was the worst class I've ever taken. She was just an insecure nutcase with a PhD on a power trip. I barely passed. Oh, and the course text was of course her own book. Saw a course at my college called Digital Media and American Culture. Sounds neat. I thought, I'll go to a lecture during the shopping period. The professor is 10 minutes late. An 80-year-old man who gets up and literally asks a student in the front to tell him how many Facebook friends she has and then how many real friends do you have. Was flabbergasted when he asked if anyone in the classroom had read 1984 and most of the class raised their hands. He was 100% convinced that millennials never pick up books anymore. Yeah. No. I once had a professor say you get 2 absences this semester. More than 2 and you fail. It doesn't matter what the excuse is. Sorry. With older relatives who were sick and dying. And not being a psychic myself to know whether or not I'd get sick or if I'd forget to set an alarm. Or any number of unforeseeable things. That level of rigidity and unwillingness to compromise isn't worth it. I'm late to the game, but when your professor opens the first lecture by having any students who are retaking the course stand up so he can ridicule them and tell the rest of the class not to be failures. I'm not grading any assignments this term. Your grade rests entirely on the final exam. First day of college. My business teacher asked what profit is. I said it was revenue minus expenses. He said no. It's actually the total net gain. I dropped that class 3 hours later. Professor was semi-retired. One of his conditions for coming out of full retirement was all his courses had to be done by 9 AM so he could still enjoy his day. No one passed his 7 AM advanced calculus classes. Doesn't speak clear English and doesn't hold office hours. This is for a university in USA. PS. Holding office hours but never being there doesn't help anyone. By appointment only. But having zero availability also doesn't help anyone. I had a biology class with a professor who wore a fanny pack and had stains on his shirt. On the first day, he said that the class would require at least 4 hours of studying every day. The professor also said that he didn't mind crushing our dreams and giving us an F. The class was full at the beginning and ended with 3 students. I had an accounting professor tell us that there was no way you could get an A in her class with a full-time course load and a part-time job. I remember being infuriated because I supported myself and had a full-time job and a full-time course load. I would have dropped it if she wasn't the only prof that taught it. I got an A and felt super smug. But I still have nightmares about that class. I haven't quite finalized the coursework and grading, so I'll be adjusting them as we go along. Surprise assignments. Surprise tests. Way too many group projects. I should have known. In retrospect, if the instructor casually says dumb, inappropriate shit, look, I'm all for an environment in which instructors can have fun, relate to students, not just teach course material out of a textbook. Those teachers are awesome. When I say inappropriate, I don't mean telling a few jokes here or there. I mean talking about his dog-faced ex-wife on the first day of class. Yup, Good chance the dude is a huge narcissist who will waste time patting himself on the back instead of teaching. And designing tests to purposely trick students just so he can feel clever about being right. Only had this happen once. But the guy was the worst. Or I mean, when a teacher tries to be too relatable, tries to sell him herself outside of an educational context, and eventually sends you a Facebook message earlier asking if you want to come by his place later for some drinks when you're 18 years old. Also happened to me. They hand out the syllabus and you see that the first 4 chapters are covered in week 1 with an exam scheduled for week 2. And then, upon further examination, you realize that this is a recurring theme for the next 15 weeks. Nope. From one I just dropped. No exams. At all. A 10-page paper was worth 50% of the mark and the other 50% was from giving a presentation to the class. There were 2 extremely expensive textbooks, which she told us at length about how hard they were to find and that the bookstore didn't have any. She said she called the publisher and even they didn't have any copies. The textbooks were required starting next week and the discussions would be based off of the textbook readings. The fastest shipping would still take at least 2 weeks to get the books there. She was very condescending and rude. Said that if we didn't have prior background into subject, it would be an extremely steep learning curve, but there wasn't a prereq for the class in subject. You'll have to forgive me if I don't understand your American sentiments. As an international, I'm unfamiliar with your culture. Stated by a woman who lived in America till the age of 12. She thought she was the most intelligent person because she'd been able to live abroad. Worst professor I've had. Linux class. I'm a hired consultant and I've never used Linux before. Thanks it tech. Please discharge my fraudulent student loan debt now. You should learn how to do everything longhand. The exact quote from my grad school finance professor. Yup, time value of money calculations without a calculator. I get the thought that you should know the mechanics. But let's be honest, if your accountant started doing math with pencil and paper you would run. Dropped that class after bombing the first test. Took it again the next semester and the first day that he passed out the cheat sheets for every brand of calculator made. Solid A that time. I had a teacher that I loved but everyone hated. My economics teacher was an absolute madman. First day of econ. Madman first rule. Any and all cell phones are to remain off. If I see you using them, I will throw them out the door. Cell phone rings. It's his. Madman looks at class. Grabs cell phone and throws it out the door. Madman didn't need to talk to my wife anyway. Double quote. Edit. My top comment is one of my favorite memories. Thanks Reddit. You guys are awesome. I had a counseling professor, of all people, try to assert that there is no way of knowing that mental illnesses are real. So we shouldn't have to treat them as such. That's absolutely absurd. So I asked him his opinion on the use of brain scans to show trends in the brain function of people with a mental illness, depression, ADHD, schizophrenia, etc. in comparison to healthy brains. He didn't have one. So I dropped that class and ran. Took it again at the same school with a different professor. And he basically admitted that the other guy was a little nuts. The workload they give you due for next class when it's your first class. First week of class has homework that takes 10 hours to do. Professor, the assignment last time was simple to get you up and running. We'll have longer ones starting this week. Class of 80 averages a 40% on a test prof. That's what they get for not learning the material. You should take this teacher. If you just show up for the final he will give you a passing grade. Fresh out of HS me thought that this sounded great. First day of class. 45 chairs in the class are all full and there are people lining the wall to get in. Fast forward to the final. Me and maybe 10 other people attend. I pass the class. Even though the teacher was awful. This was pre-calculus. I show up to calculus the next semester. First class. We'll review the stuff you'll need to know from your pre-calc class to succeed in this class. Here's a practice worksheet. I couldn't do a single problem. I had not learned a thing from my pre-calc class and knew that I would have to retake it. In the long haul it pushed me from my science major to a liberal arts major. Would not recommend. In an English class for the 12th grade, I was handed back an essay and with it a mark of 64%. Hard teacher, but I'm not the best at English. With this mark was a comment that read excellent work. That's when I knew. This bitch was Lucifer. A red flag that the teacher has a really bad ego problem is if they require you buy their books. Especially if they only recommend books they've written. Yes. You are the only person who has ever written about James Baldwin. No one else has anything remotely worth adding to the conversation. Also, using your students as a means of increasing your cell numbers making more money is a shitty, egotistical thing to do. The professor can't stop making political comments. Especially if it's a class like Spanish or calculus. I have gotten my entire degree taking online classes from the University of Houston, and there are two things that scream drop this class. You are required to log on to Blackboard at least 3 days a week. I didn't register for an online class because I've got ample hours in my day to log on and do schoolwork. I take online classes because I have the ability to successfully complete weeks worth of work in one day. You are required to use lockdown browser for exams and have your webcam on, and you must give me a tour of the entire room with the camera, and the volume must be on, and it must be during normal working hours. Nano 1 invades my privacy, and my normal working hours are 11 AM to 9 PM. Not much I can do about taking an exam before 5 PM. If you arrive late, then you're absent. Let me tell y'all a story from second year university. I had a course that started in second semester, and due to weather the first class had to be cancelled. Okay, that's unfortunate, but obviously not the teacher's fault. She sends out a class-wide email saying, here are the slides I would have shown today. Can you all please read through them in preparation for tomorrow? Okay, seems reasonable enough. I can understand that. But then I'm reading through those slides, I found this, which I'm going to quote to the best of my memory. If the class misbehaves, the homework assignments will get longer and more difficult. And the final exam will get more difficult. Excuse me? I have literally never met you and you're already threatening me? What the fuck? So yeah. To answer your question. That. I had a French professor who said to me, you're not on the streets anymore, because I was the only black person in the class. I was taking a general chemistry class and a fellow student asked a pretty great question. I had the same question, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Our professor, who by the way was a very nice and brilliant man, answered it with, you should have learned that in your physics class, and then continued on with the lecture. I didn't need to take physics for my major. The next class session was our first exam, and that specific question was on the exam. Class average was 44%. I dropped the class the next day. I took a physics class when I was in college. Day 1. I am paging through the syllabus, which was like 5 pages long by the way, and I see that there's a 5-page paper due later that week. I asked the professor if that was a mistake. He said it was not. I dropped the class that afternoon. Edit. This post is getting a lot of attention, so I will address what seems to be a common theme in replies I am getting. I agree that a 5-page paper is not a large amount of work. The red flag was more about the fact that there was a term paper assigned for a hard science like physics. I did not need the class to graduate. I only took it because I was interested in it. So I decided it was probably not the right fit for me. I took an economics course and bombed the first test. I went to the professor and told her I really want to do well in your class. What are some suggestions you might have on how I can be successful? She looked at the grade on the test and said, you should drop the class and change your major. I may be shit at economics, but I can follow instructions. When he pulls a cell signal blocker from his briefcase on the first day of class. Yes, this actually happened to me. Halfway through the semester he went on a 3-week vacation and we had a stand-in professor. Learned more from the stand-in prof than the actual professor. Or, when the prof says you guys will not need to learn X and proceed to skip some important topic. I was getting a business degree majoring in IT. We had a programming class and our professor said, you guys aren't comp science majors, you won't need to know this. He proceeded to skip constructors in a Java course. A group project worth a substantial amount of your grade. Fuck group projects. Had a professor in an online class who answered all of my questions by telling me to Google certain phrases. I completed my MS part-time while working full-time. As a practicing engineer, I wanted to focus on courses that had practical, real-world application potential. For my very first MS course, I enrolled in Elastic Stability. First day of class in my first semester of grad school. The professor opened up with the following. This is an entirely theoretical class. We won't be using experimentation to determine our answers, but we'll determine everything through mathematical manipulation. Basically we are going to derive. I dropped that class the minute I got home. My English 1010 professor spent an entire day asking the class about the best way to pick up women. The girl sitting next to me never came back to the class after that, which made him nervous I think. 2 and they're both tied to my maiden name. I had a business law professor who had been my father's lawyer in his custody dispute with my stepmother. The lawyer had absolutely grilled and berated me in my testimony, making me cry, and all I had to say was how often I had to pick up my siblings because my father worked late. When the professor called roll the first day, he paused when he called my name, looked up and gave me a smirk. Dropped it immediately. Same semester I took French, and because I had a French Canadian last name, the professor called on me to recite the alphabet in French and respond to all her questions, which she asked in French. It was the first day of class. Dropped. My high school physics teacher's first sentence was, if you're just taking this course for the sake of a credit, drop this class immediately. I don't believe in curves. If they have a thick ass accent that you can't understand. I took biology with a professor who had a very thick Indian accent. He was a really smart and nice guy, but we had to take notes off of his talking lectures. Yeah. I failed that class. If your English professor has strict guidelines for how your work needs to look. X. All quotes must be highlighted in green. All work cited in red ink. Highlight source text for answers in yellow X'd. Took our midterm exam and felt really great about it. Got a 73% and was devastated because I had worked hard on the paper. She had marked me down from a 95% to 73%, all due to not following her guidelines for formatting. Explain I'm red-green colorblind and the color coding really messes with me. Did not give one shit. If your organizational methods are more important than the work I'm submitting, you can fuck right off. When the first thing they say before reading the 2-page 1.0 space syllabus is, I've been teaching for X years so I deserve your respect, or something like that. That's basically a 100% accurate indicator that this person cannot be wrong, and they will talk to you like you're a piece of shit. They can't earn anybody's respect, so they have to ransom it. Says no before you can even attempt to finish answering comma. Took a business law course and this arsehole right off the bat gave everyone low scores on homework and tests. Dropped his class after the first 2 weeks to avoid a W. And ended up getting straight A's in every other class. Was also a dick who bragged about how much he could be making had he not become a teacher. When a tenured prof shows up to the first day of class late and seemingly hungover. I hate computers. I helped build some of the first computers that would fill 3 of these classrooms. I've never found a computer I liked and I never will. Also, you won't be touching the computers for the whole first semester. It's worksheets for you. And it will only be worksheets until I'm satisfied that you won't break my machines. It was a computer applications class. At a tech school. Teaching how to use a Microsoft Office suite and a laser engraving program in a school district that taught how to use Microsoft Office in elementary school. Fuck that guy. I switched to Intro to Electronics. Made friends with a teacher. Then was cleared to work as a tech for that campus. Made that first teacher really mad when the kid that dropped his class in the first week came back a month later to fix a computer that he fucked up. I once got out my laptop and dropped a class during the first lecture when our grad student told us that instead of an exam, the final would be a group, no thanks, video project, hell no, about contemporary social issues, later. Tater. Professor. One from my past I wish I realized at the time. Calculus 101 was a MWF class. 1 hour each day. My freshman year, the math department decided they wanted to try having it on teeth too. But for 1.5 hours. Lucky me. I was in the experiment class. As my professor explained on the first day, we would get all of the same material and assignments. Just a slight change to the schedule. It sounded fine on paper until the first assignment was given. Then you realize that the class had been taught for years one way, and no one considered how changing it might affect things. We routinely got handouts that would have helped with homework after the assignment was due. Sometimes, an assignment would be due Friday for the regular class or Thursday for us, but we wouldn't actually learn how to do the last few problems until Thursday. The regular kids learned Wednesday. While we ran out of time on Tuesday, it was a hot mess. And my learning definitely suffered for it. TLDR. Stay away from the experiment classes that mess with the schedule. Remember that an active social life is incompatible with doing well in this class. Exact quote from a professor at Rutgers University in an email to his students. Yells at the aid of a disabled student. When the teacher says they've never failed a student, but the average test score on the first exam is 44/150. Ended up being don't take this class in the first place. But we had the AP English teacher come into our honors English class to talk to us about what to expect if we signed up for AP English next year. And he basically told us he doesn't give a crap if our parents would beat us over not getting an A or if we would go kill ourselves or something. I'd always been pretty much a straight A student with the exception of gym class, and I'd never gone to a teacher and asked them to change my grade in my life. So it's not like I anticipated needing a compassionate grade boost or anything. But I did not sign up for that class and took scholarship English that year instead. It was way too easy for me and all of my friends were in the AP class. But high school is dehumanizing enough without having a teacher who feels the need to explicitly state he doesn't care whether you live or die. Fuck that. Got an introductory email last week from the teacher of one of my 300 level courses. In the attached syllabus, every third sentence was bolded, underlined, and highlighted. In some cases, she used red font as well to really drive her point home about class procedures and expectations, none of which digressed from the standard university code of conduct. Additionally, she instructed us that no one was allowed to send an email to the rest of the class about the course without her prior approval. Then and only then would she send it on our behalf. Drop that class like a hot potato. I'll find something else to fulfill the requirement. If you want to get nothing in return, you can like and join my Discord. There is a link in the description.